You know what the problem is with science these days? It's not peer review that isn't really peered or reviewed or anything like that. It's not fake data. No, no, no. It's too many white guys. That's it. That's the problem. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green for BillWhittle.com. This is Right Angle, of course, with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott. And there was just the... I don't even know what to call this thing. Hysterical, sad, whatever. Two geologists, or geographers? Yes, geographers.
I think it's geographists.
Geographists. I like your word better, Scott. Reported to the Washington Post on Sunday. It's Carrie Mott and Daniel Cockayne. They argued in a recent paper that quoting white guys, straight white guys, perpetuates what they call white, oh, this is going to be a fun word to pronounce, white heteromasculinism, that's a mouthful, which they defined as a system of oppression that benefits only those who are white, male, able-bodied, economically privileged, heterosexual, and cisgendered. Scott, isn't that the problem with science these days? Too many guys who know what they're doing?
I'm trying to picture the...
Absolutely epic.
I mean, my brother's a scientist, and I'm trying to picture him sitting down to write a paper with his graduate assistants or whatever, and they're coming up with their thesis, and they're mapping out the responsibilities that various people will have to do to research this, that, or the other thing. And somebody comes up with this, a brilliant observation by some scientist that they found in the research, and I'm trying to see my brother who goes, now wait a minute, what was the sex of that individual? Like anybody would care about that. I think what they're probably complaining about is the fact that the vast majority of people over the years who have been engaged in science have been part of Western civilization and therefore, by and large,
Sure.
have been white, many of which have been male, some of which is due to historic, gender role discrimination, if you want to call it that way, where women were kind of shut out from being able to participate in that kind of stuff. So I guess what they're basically saying is we don't want to have scientific papers that reflect the history of our trade, and we want to force people to dig into research and use quotations from scientists who, based not on the science, but based on, what they're walking around with below the belt.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you see, at first I thought they were doing something maybe that could be interpreted as noble. Instead of just going to the same old white guys that everybody else is quoting, let's look for some newer material by
Sure.
people who are female or different colored or gendered or whatever. But that doesn't seem to be the case, because it's this next bit really got me. The quote is, "Work done by women and other minorities have often been overlooked by their peers, so far so good, hindering their professional advancement and depriving disciplines of diverse perspectives." Now, Bill, I want you to picture it's sometime in the near future. You are in orbit. Burt Rutan, a buddy of yours, has actually invited you aboard Spaceship 3 or 4, whatever number we're on in this not too distant future. And as you prepare to descend back to the Earth, the planet I do believe of your birth, aren't you counting on a heat shield that has been developed by people of diverse perspectives?
Yeah.
The entire purpose of science is to weed this nonsense out, which is why it's under assault. And by strange coincidence, my firewall for this week is called The Republic of Emotion. And at the very end of that, I talk about this woman who, very similar to this, is basically saying we need a feminist quantum theory for the universe because Newtonian physics is too oppressive and patriarchal. And so just as an exercise, I tried to figure out what that would sound like. So just allow me to quote myself for one moment. I say that's how physics works here in the Republic of Emotion. Not every action has an equal and opposite reaction, but rather every non-hierarchically determined community-based mobilizing event has a fully equal, diverse, and joyous reaction that may at times seem to be non-consensual to the pervading artificial direction metrics applied by patriarchal white supremacists as a result of their racist privilege. And that's the kind of world that we're getting into. And let's just be clear about why this is. Our friend Evan Sayed has really nailed this. He says that really the only thing that progressives are good at is rhetoric. In fact, when you look at the occupations they go into, teaching, journalism, acting, that kind of thing, news reporting. These are rhetorical positions, and he has a hilarious routine about how these are people who don't do anything, making fun of the people that actually do things. But basically, that's all they've got is they've got rhetoric. And when you are that far enough out there in the world of rhetoric and emotion, you come to believe that the world can be bent to your comfort by rhetoric and emotion. And this is, needless to say, the antithesis of science. Science doesn't care. Science doesn't care. It doesn't care what color Marconi is. It doesn't care what color Bernoulli is. It doesn't matter what sex Einstein is. It doesn't care. It doesn't care. And to this argument that women have been, and minorities have been oppressed so much, and that's why there's no great scientists, because they've been so busy out there working in the fields, I would remind them that the single greatest scientific insight in the history of our species, and I think by a wide margin, is not an apple falling and Newton going, hey, why did that happen? It was done by a guy who was an utter failure in elementary school, who was working in a patent office in Bern, Switzerland, who was sitting there basically had the night shift, at a bank security guard. That's basically what he was doing. He was simply sitting there with nothing to do in his office. And this individual, without any laboratory, without any money, without any connections, without any resources, without anything, started imagining what would happen if you were traveling at the speed of light and you turned on a light switch, or what would happen if an elevator continued to accelerate upwards forever, and those kind of things. And Einstein came up with special relativity, general relativity. Most of what we know about photometrics, energy conversion from light, photovoltaic cells, all this stuff. He just sat down and thought it up. Now,
but Bill,
that's not. I don't see where the privilege is there. And by the way, he was not like this brilliantly educated guy who had come out of the finest academies. He was a failure in elementary school.
Bill, wouldn't it have been a better E equals MC squared if Einstein had been a black lesbian?
No, it wouldn't have been a better one, and it wouldn't have been a worse one either. See, that's the thing. It wouldn't have been either of those things. And the reason that people can be this emotional and have this much faith in this idiocy of rhetoric is only because the people who are not emotional and who do real things like, build computer networks and run electrical power plants and water pumping stations and so on. And I should also add, fly fighter missions and carry an M4 around in bad places. Because those non-rhetorical people have been so successful, they've allowed the rhetorical people to think that the world is so well ordered and so naturally clean and productive and rich and efficient that it's just simply the state of the world, and therefore it doesn't matter what you say.
And Steve, can I throw in one thing where I think
ahead,
they may be legitimate in this, okay? And I can see this being of benefit. If you come from a different kind of background or upbringing, or even a different sex than the predominant ones that are in the trade that you're in, you may come at problems a little differently. You may come up with theories that might be shaped by your upbringing or by your, particular perspective on life that would be worth exploring. But when it comes down to the science of examining and analyzing those theories and testing those theories, it should be no different. So the great benefit is not something we should be crying about. We should be saying, hey, look, if you're a female scientist, you may come up with some approaches to things that your male scientific colleagues may not, just because they didn't grow up with the same sort of thoughts that you did.
I don't agree with that.
Use that as a benefit. I have different perspectives than Bill does and than Steve do because I grew up in a different way. Take that as a benefit. That's not a hardship.
The reason I don't agree with that is not because it's not a nice sentiment, but it's simply that I don't think when you get down to the kind of science we're talking about, breakout science, I don't think there are a multiplicity of cultures in the world. I don't think there's a multiplicity of language. There's one language. It's mathematics. That's the language, and everybody speaks it. And all of the cultural elements are the building blocks of what is known, these heuristics of understanding what people have already understood and putting these together in unique ways. But when we're talking about the kind of stuff we're talking about, this isn't like, This is something I learned in a village in Idaho that you couldn't see because you were, in a skyscraper in New York. You're so far out of that world that I just don't know if that thing carries a lot of weight.
I'm just saying an Eskimo is more likely to invent a fur coat than a guy from the plains of Africa.
That's true.
All right. Guys, I'll try to wrap this up, although I'm not exactly sure how. I wanted to get back to what Bill was saying, I guess, about the basics of science, the foundation of science. For that, you really have to go back to Aristotle, who said that all knowledge starts with the premise that A is A. But
Yep.
I can't quote Aristotle because he's a dead white guy, and the people who need to hear that aren't going to hear it from a dead white guy. And the next guy I thought of was Joe Friday and Just the Facts Man, but another dead white guy. So I guess the point is that the people who most need to benefit from science are scientists who aren't doing things scientifically. And how do you fix that? I don't know. Here's what I do know, though. I'm never going to buy an atlas from geographers who insist that South America is just a social contract. No. All right, I'm Steve Green. This has been Right Angle for BillWhittle.com, brought to you by our pairing members. Click on over, join yourself. We'd love to have you aboard, and we'll see you next time.